Hello there, my name is Ben Taylor-Davies and I own a company called RegenBen. I've been given the title of the Healthy Food Dichotomy. I think most of us are fairly aware that we are told and asked by the government and the NHS that our 5 a day is something that will help us keep healthy, fight disease, fight obesity, and overall health of the population of the UK. And it's something that's really important. The problem being is that keeping humans healthy in the UK seems to have the most detrimental impact on our soil health and the natural environment. Fruit, salad, and vegetable production, where we have grade 1 soils, unfortunately get given the grade 5 treatment. And the true cost of cheap vegetables is actually quite expensive in terms of soil health, soil management, and the wider environment biodiversity. As I've pointed out here, how much soil loss do you want with your carrots? And more importantly, the dysfunctionality of soil, the need then for the soil is used as a growing medium rather than anything else. And so synthetic inputs are increased and continually increased. And we get on this moron treadmill whereby we just keep putting more and more and more synthetics on in order to produce the results we desire and also require. This is a photograph taken on my own farm, and many moons ago, 1998, we decided to put field margins around all our farm for increased biodiversity along our hedge lines to reintroduce hares and grey partridge in particular. And the really scary thing was after I travelled the world on a Nuffield scholarship and learned an awful lot about soil and soil protection and growing healthy plants and that sort of thing, I happened to notice that one of our potato fields, the height and the amount of erosion we'd lost compared to that 6-metre margin was something that was actually quite frightening. And you can see here, it's probably 2 to 3 feet or nearly 90 centimetres of soil we've lost in only 17 years. And that was a real wake-up call for me to actually start to think of things far more differently about how we're doing things. Whilst we always had an interest in biodiversity and things on the farm and planting hedgerows and doing what we needed to do, we were wholly concerned with the actual asset we owned, i.e. soil, and the fact we were losing far more than we were creating. And if I wanted to give something to my children one day, other than bedrock, we had to have a really serious conversation about what we were actually doing. The other thing that was quite important was we were growing cover crops, interestingly enough, over the winter. But of course, the mismanagement of those cover crops with livestock grazing to the point where this is some photographs I've taken not only of my own farm, but around the country and places I see. This is not uncommon. And unfortunately, the small amount of good that the cover crops were doing is far outweighed by the grazing of the livestock and the mismanagement of those grazing points. One thing I always talk about is how many plants in the natural environment are actually deficient in nitrogen. And of course, zero. Haber Bosch process, something I think most people are familiar with and certainly heard of. It was quite an incredible feat of engineering. And for those that have read The Alchemy of Air, was quite a remarkable achievement in its day at trying to actually stop starvation on a world scale. Of course, ammonium nitrate is also used for other things. And as you can see, bombing during the war creates huge craters in the soil and creates huge amounts of damage. Of course, we're using ammonium nitrate in a much smaller sense of the word, but in actual fact, as I've highlighted here, it's just a different scale, but we're getting the same result as dropping bombs. We have to start thinking very differently about how we look after and care for our soil. And of course, all this nutrition we're applying synthetically is soluble. In terms of it travels in soil moisture. So when we get droughts in springs that we seem to be getting more and more of currently, and really dry weather, unfortunately that nutrition gets locked up and is therefore not available to the plant. So in actual fact, it has a detrimental effect on yield there too. These are typical photographs of chemical stores and fertilizer storages. And one thing for me is, do we really need to rely on all of these to grow healthy food? I had underlined the word rely initially because I think there are places and times where they are useful as a backup, but unfortunately what we have is a current model where we certainly use them and rely on these products to create what we're looking for. And that's something that's really not quite right. And as you can see here, whether it's orchards, whether it's huge monocrops of vegetables, whether it's the application of nematicides or the absolute beating of soils to create these salads and vegetables and the seed beds in which they grow. And as I've said there, do we really need to rely? I must have left that slide in. Okay, so that's enough of the bad news. Perhaps we should start talking about what can and should be done. And I think one of the big things for me is replacing death with life. Do we need to keep applying sides that kill? In actual fact, what happens when we replace all these sides with life? Looking at regenerative fruit, salad, and vegetable production, looking for a more sustainable future. Of course, we're trying to increase profits too. And improving the quality and storability of food. And I refer to this technique that I haven't developed by far, but I'm certainly one of the members in the UK at the moment that are pushing very hard. And I've called it the biological flood technique. This was a photograph I took on my Nuffield scholarship, and I think it pretty much tells you an awful lot of the story, what that lonely plant is doing to soil. And therefore, the picture of the man in armor, of course, is it's really important that these plants on Mother Nature's planet are actually armoring her soil and protecting that. And that's a photograph I use an awful lot to demonstrate what one single plant can do in terms of restoring plant health or certainly protecting it. So what do we do? Well, we're looking at diverse cover crops first and foremost. We're looking at keep harvesting the sun's energy to feed all of the soil life. What we have to understand is while that looks beautiful at the top, and it's certainly adding to huge amounts of beneficial insects, the really exciting things are what's going on under the ground, and the very fact that out of all of those roots, there are exuding root exudates high in carbohydrates that are feeding the soil microbes, which in turn are returning natural nutrients back to the plant. And it's a cycle that goes on, and as the solar panel gets larger, it produces more carbohydrate into the soil, and in turn replies with more nutrition for the plant. Here we are back on my own farm, the mob grazing of cover crops for soil health. The lower picture shows pretty much to the right of that electric fence, if you can spot that, is where we've literally just moved the sheep away. And as you can see, there's an awful lot of green material and living roots still in the soil. To the left of that fence is where we'd moved them a week before. And as you can see, that it's regrowing and it's certainly protecting the soil. And there's more root exudates going into the soil to keep this soil biology fed. This is a photograph I took of two neighbouring farms with totally different management techniques. I will just say which one of those is the regenerative farmer with veg in the rotation. And in actual fact, of course, it's the one on the right. The one on the left has a dysfunctional soil. It has the odd earthworm. And as you can see, the root of the plant is actually following that earthworm channel. They will do what they can. But of course, those plants on the right have huge rooting ability. You can even see the fungal associations in the soil as well. So it's incredible what we can do, even in a veg situation where we understand the functionality of the soil and protect the soil. We can actually have healthy soils with fruit, veg, and salad production. Here's another photograph that really highlights that, where on the left-hand side you can see coming into this stream, a regenerative farm, and joining the rest of the stream where the conventional farm practices is causing huge amounts of soil runoff. And another great visual photograph. Nematicides is something that is used quite extensively. So the products that kill nematodes, rather than create the vacuum of soil biology, and that is what a nematicide does, is look to kill most of the soil biology. Why don't we overcrowd it? If you've got an overcrowded soil full of all kinds of biology, there is no way anything can dominate it. What happens in agricultural soils is the fact that we cause our own problems. What we consider to be soil-borne pests are the first colonizers in this vacuum. So in actual fact, let's do the opposite and don't create a vacuum, fill it with biology. And all of this biology, some of it predatory on our diseases, but a lot of it just won't allow for this explosion of our considered diseases. And as I put here, feed, enhance, and keep protecting. Removal of insecticides, so you can see beetle banks and margins, and these are fields in high veg production, or as you can see, the orchard. So we're looking at using beneficials to do all the predation of our insect pests, and it works tremendously well. One thing we have to be aware of course, is the size of the fields, and some fields now have to be split, and we're doing these splitting either with beetle banks or strips of wildflowers to enhance these beneficials and allow them to work either side of the strips to keep the predators at bay. Removal of herbicides. Interesting enough, the photograph on the top left of a potato planter that used to apply Amistar on the technique system, and on the front used to apply nematicide, is now actually being converted to actually plant molasses, sugar, seaweeds through the technique system to feed biology. And at the front, it's used, the microgranules are used to actually plant companion crops. And these companion crops are used, as you can see, to do all sorts of things, not only feed beneficials, but swamp out huge amounts of troublesome weeds, but also provide acidification, which would prevent scab on these potatoes, and nitrogen and phosphate foraging. So in actual fact, they are multi-sourced things of what we're actually trying to do. And it certainly keeps the biology really motivated to do what we want it to do. The removal of synthetic fertilizers is something that's becoming more and more important, certainly on social media. And something I've done for quite a while is use Ian Robertson of Sustainable Soil Management to really start to get to grips with the understanding of soil. There is, in my opinion, there's no better soil sampling explanation than what you can see on the right-hand side of Ian Robertson. And to complement this, on the left-hand side is the SAP analysis done by Nova Crop Control in the Netherlands, where we can actually take plant health analysis by using their SAP to actually determine how a plant is responding to what it's growing in, and whether we need to make any adjustments at all. And the adjustments, funny enough, are often not nitrogen. And here we should look at nutrition being available and not soluble, and the enhancement of the rhizophagy cycle rather than the stopping of the rhizophagy cycle. A healthy plant with that correct nutrition will be far better suited to resist pest and disease attack. These nitrates filled soils that cause plants to grow at a rate that causes really short chain carbohydrates and amino acids is something that both pests and diseases feast on. If we can provide the correct nutrition, we provide much greater and much longer carbohydrate chains, and they almost become impossible to feed on by the lower trophics that we consider pests. Of course, all of this often leads to the removal of fungicides, and certainly, if not the removal, certainly the huge reduction. The future. There's some really exciting opportunities in the future, and here, in actual fact, it's a field of wheat, but we're looking far beyond this. And this is a field of wheat that's been grown into a white clover understory. And the idea here is that the clover stays as the understory for as many years as we possibly can. So not only is it armoring the soil, it's also preventing weed infestations, because Mother Nature will always look to put plants on her surface. If we've already covered the surface with plants, we save her a job there. And of course, being a legume, it fixes huge amounts of nitrogen. So what we've got here is a winter wheat crop that's provided an awful lot of nitrogen by it, no weed control necessary, and just growing very happily, and in a high blackgrass scenario as well. Seems to be a really exciting opportunity. The question I have is, can we actually plant veg into these living mulches? And that is something we're going to be looking at moving forward. And the little photograph of the insect shows these modern drills that are just quite phenomenal at actually planting vegetables into cover crops while the soil is still green, covered in plants. So it's really exciting. There's lots to happen, lots of exciting things to do. For those who've got any questions, obviously use the Q&A facility, and I'll do my best to answer, what I am doing and what a lot of us are trying to achieve. I'll leave you with that, and I'll say thank you very much for listening, and look forward to the panel discussion.